Good morning.
Hello.
Good.
First sign of success. People actually found their way in. Welcome. I'm glad the link worked. Glad you're here. We're going to let people be filtering in here for probably a few minutes.
Sure.
Good afternoon to all of you who are still filtering in. I think we'll give it another minute or two to let people find their way here. I'm glad that you all are here. Welcome. You can see that we've we're leaving this kind of informal in the Zoom space. We haven't made this a webinar. This is a place where we're all here together. And our purpose today is going to be to have an ability to answer questions as we have them. So for a good conversation, we'll give it another minute or two. Just check to see if my screen showing up. Can people see my presentation?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Looks good, Jeff.
All right. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and get started for today. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff Burright. I work for the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development in the Oregon Coastal Management Program. The purpose of today is to provide some information about an upcoming process that we will be spearheading to develop a state offshore wind energy roadmap. My goal here for today, excuse me, get going. Introduce myself to you all and introduce what this process is going to be. Want to talk about what the roadmap is, as has been directed toward us from state legislation, as well as conversations that we've been having and that we know have preceded this process as to what the roadmap can be. And then I want to talk a little bit more about logistics and structure of the process that we're going to be embarking on to develop this roadmap and the engagement activities that we're expecting to have happen there. And then I want to leave plenty of time to allow for questions and answer them to the best of our ability. So with that, let's go ahead and get going. First, if any on the call have not met me before, again, my name is Jeff Burright. I've been with the Oregon Coastal Management Program for 2.5 years and with the state for, gosh, 7.5, I think. Um, Most recently, within the coastal management program, I was responsible for coordinating reviews under the Coastal Zone Management Act, federal consistency reviews of federal actions that have effects to coastal uses and resources of the state. And that included the most recent federal action proposal by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management for leasing of the Outer Continental Shelf for offshore wind exploration. Um, I have a master's in science from Oregon State University in marine resource management, where my focus was on marine renewable energy and particularly about how people work together to manage uncertainty and risk when it comes to a new industry trying to come into the ocean environment. I have prior experience as a facilitator and mediator for interagency decision making when it comes to complex environmental decision making that I hope will lend well to this process that's coming in here. And then on a personal note, I've spent some years living on the ocean, and I have a deep love for it and a love for beauty and systems and life that is really motivating me in this process as we try to find the state's best path forward for offshore wind. And then just for fun, I've actually built a floating offshore wind turbine before and watched it slowly fall apart in the salt air and environment. So I've got some, I guess, practical experience. Uh, yeah, so that's me. And I'm going to be the coordinator for this offshore wind roadmap engagement project. Also want to talk just for a moment about what the Oregon Coastal Management Program is. We are housed within the Department of Land Conservation and Development, where we are responsible for overseeing the statewide land use planning goals related to coastal resources. That includes estuaries, shorelands, beaches and dunes, and the territorial sea. And within that, we also I guess, manage and serve the Oregon Territorial Sea Plan that is under the auspices of the Ocean Policy Advisory Council and staffed by us. We engage in estuary planning, hazard planning. In the middle, we have this Federal Consistency Authority, which is an authority that is passed down from a federal law, the Coastal Zone Management Act, that gives the state the ability to review federal actions in the coastal zone. And that includes federal agency activities, as well as federal licenses and permits, and allows us to review those actions against the policies of our state. And if we find that actions are not consistent, the state has some leverage in whether those actions move forward. And I mention that because it is a driver to this roadmap process. And I also want to emphasize that the Coastal Management Program is a networked program. We have a total of 11 state agencies and 41 cities and counties within the coastal zone who are all part of the Oregon Coastal Management Program and who have enforceable policies that are within our program and that we use when we do those federal consistency reviews. That's kind of the overall structure and context of how new activities come through the state and are reviewed, as well as existing authorities and permit processes that are owned by these other jurisdictions. I want to start by reviewing what we know about the typical offshore wind process and talk about where we are in this moment. And I know that things have been changing a lot recently, but let's get that foundational built between us and then we'll move into the roadmap itself. This figure depicts the rainbow chart developed by BOEM, how they typically perform leasing and approval of an offshore wind energy project off of any state's coast. They begin with area identification, which is a process that they began in Oregon starting in 2019, where they started with a very large area and worked their way down toward 2 wind energy areas off of Coos Bay, Reedsport, and Brookings. and then they have a checkpoint with the state before they can issue leases to lessees or developers to go out and explore those areas and then develop an application to actually go out and build something. That first yellow arrow happened this year. We began the state review of the BOEM leasing decision in May and put forward a decision in July, which was a conditional concurrence. In other words, um, allowing the action to proceed if a number of conditions were included with that action that involved protection of environmental resources, processes that involved different user groups, et cetera. Um, if leasing were to proceed, a lease would be issued. There would be a period of up to 5 years of site assessment, investigation, preparation of a permit, and then there would be a second opportunity for the state to weigh in. And at that point, what would happen is a developer, with the information that they have gathered, would submit to the federal government, to BOEM, a proposal, a construction operations plan that BOEM would approve or deny. But before they can approve it, they have to check in with the state again under our federal consistency authority. And I'm emphasizing this because these are the state's two main points of contact with the offshore wind process. And they're a way in which the state gets to have a seat at that federal decision-making table. As I imagine most of us, if not all of us, in this information session are aware, BOEM identified these two wind energy areas with the intent to conduct an auction this month and move forward with leasing. For those of you who've been watching in the news, that action has been postponed and is no longer on the schedule as far as we can see it. However, the action and the proposal and the process by BOEM to begin this offshore wind energy leasing and siting led to some conversations within the state. It began as an informal conversation and grew to the point that in the 2024 legislative session, House Bill 4080 was introduced and passed. House Bill 4080 included labor standards that were applicable to offshore wind projects and directed the Department of Land Conservation and Development to lead an offshore wind roadmap engagement effort, which is what we're doing right now. This is the very first step in that. It also has directed DLCD to evaluate the existing enforceable policies of the state to make sure that they are up to the challenge and responsive to the effects that we can foresee from offshore wind. And we see those as connected efforts. Legislative bill included some guideposts for the state as to what should be included in this roadmap. And it's not an exhaustive list, but it said that the roadmap shall define standards to be considered in the processes related to offshore wind development and approval, and that those standards must support a variety of interests and topic areas that include stakeholder engagement, local and regional coastal communities, the creation of economic opportunities, as well as the sustainment of existing local and regional economies, the creation of a workforce that is trained, housed, and equitable, protection of tribal, cultural, and archaeological resources, culturally significant view sheds and other interests of tribes, protection of the environment and marine species, and the achievement of state energy and climate policy objectives. There are a lot of areas for the roadmap to cover. And as I mentioned, that bill in the legislature was preceded by a series of informal conversations that occurred over, I think, most of 2023, where a group got together led by the Midwater Trawlers Cooperative, Renewable Northwest, and the Blue Green Alliance, if memory serves, but gathered a wide range of individuals to discuss what ought to go into an offshore wind roadmap by the state and provided some considerations, some guidelines for us as we embark on this effort. And that included um, being in consideration of the full spatial extent of offshore wind development, to consider the entire life cycle of a project from beginning all the way to decommissioning, and then to think beyond just our standards and think about Oregon's strategic role in policy, research, and business of offshore wind. So that is setting the table for what we are here to do now, which is to actually build this roadmap. This is kind of a complicated diagram, but it's a way to envision what this roadmap is and what it is not. So over on the far left, you can see that there was the informal offshore wind work group that developed some considerations for us. We are now in the roadmap development phase. As directed by the legislature, the roadmap is going to contain a discussion of policy needs and recommend standards to be considered. We also think that it has the ability to identify strategic challenges, opportunities, and actions, that it will be led by DLCD and involve significant engagement with many different groups to inform that roadmap. And then in parallel, as I mentioned, DLCD is also conducting an assessment of our existing enforceable policies and trying to identify where we might have gaps. Well, it's important to understand that this roadmap that we're developing is itself not enforceable policy, that enforceable policies for the state are developed through public formal rulemaking processes that could include statutory changes, changes to administrative rules, or changes to local plans and codes at the city and county level. And the idea is that this roadmap can identify policy priorities, recommendations that then can be acted upon through these other processes. There's also the possibility that this roadmap could identify a research agenda and scientific needs, that it could identify strategic supply chain investments, key conversations that need to happen to support offshore wind, and potentially marine spatial planning as well. And that all of this would occur before you would ever see a first offshore wind project reach the permitting phase. And up until a week or two ago, the expectation was that we had about 3 to 5 years before that happened. However, with the recent change in the planned schedule for leasing, it's not quite clear when next piece is going to happen. But I think the truth remains regardless that the state has an opportunity right now to do this roadmap process and to make sure that we are ready if and when it does come next. So whatever that potential future offshore wind project may be. I also want to acknowledge that in the conversations that I've been having in my month now in this role as the coordinator for this roadmap, I have heard that people see a lot of different things in what it can be. And this is, an ink blot to try to conceptualize that idea. That people see the potential for marine spatial planning, that we can bring in and address tribal interests, supply chain, strategic actions. I mean, you can see there are many different things that can be part of this conversation. However, it's also true that we have a limited amount of time to have this phase of conversation. The bill in the legislature provided some funding to support this roadmap engagement effort, and that funding runs out at the end of the biennium in June 2025. That means we have about 8 or 9 months to conduct a number of conversations around those topic areas that were directed by House Bill 4080, as well as exploring where we can go with some of these more strategic planning opportunities and how we can build that into a direction for the state when it comes to offshore wind. And so where you can see here, we conducted that federal consistency review this summer. We have now staffed up at DLCD to support this roadmap engagement effort. We have, if you're here, I assume you have seen, we have begun a recruitment for an offshore wind roadmap roundtable that would be, I would say, the primary venue for some of these conversations around what goes into the roadmap that will go until June of 2025. We are engaging with tribes and working through what their preferred involvement is in this roadmap process. And we are also planning for broader public engagement to inform the roadmap as well. I'm not a graphic artist, so please bear with this rudimentary diagram. What I'm trying to show here is a general shape of the conversation and the process as we are currently envisioning it. Again, recognizing that this has just begun and it is subject to having better ideas come forward. But the way we see it now, with tribal engagement at the top running throughout, that would be part of our process. We are also, as I said, recruiting for this offshore wind roundtable that we anticipate would meet on a monthly basis and have all-day meetings where we are talking through those topic areas that will be important to the roadmap. Out of those roundtable meetings, we also expect that there may be working groups that get formed to have a deeper dive into some of these topic areas and maybe work on strategic planning elements or convene a table that is focused on around a certain user group or topic area to just have those deeper conversations. We're planning for that in the process as well. We also are planning to have specific focus group engagement to make sure that we are able to gather perspectives and viewpoints from people who aren't able to participate in the roundtable discussions and to bring that input into our road mapping process. And as well, we are planning to have some public engagement events throughout this process as a way to poke our heads up and look around while we're in the middle of these conversations to let people know how the conversation is evolving and to bring in new feedback that can help to shape the direction of that process as it goes. And one last thing I'll say here is while our engagement process runs through the end of June under our current funding and capabilities, DLCD would continue to work on drafting the roadmap with the feedback and perspectives that we provided. And we are required under the bill to provide a report to the legislature on September 1st, 2025, describing our progress toward the development of this roadmap. And on September 1st, that may include the roadmap itself. It may not. We're open to seeing where that goes. This is my last slide of information before we can get into answering questions. Talking through some logistics. As I mentioned, we have a recruitment that is open now, and we have it open until October 14th. And we are trying to seek interest from people who may want to participate in this roundtable. And then from there, we're going to build out how to structure that conversation. We are planning to have a kickoff meeting on November 1st. We're expecting that this first meeting would not be in person and it would not be full day. This would be an opportunity to take maybe half a day, a few hours to introduce ourselves to the process, to talk about how the conversation is going to proceed, talk through a charter and how maybe even a starter outline of the roadmap to start building this together. And then pretty soon after that, we would have our first full day meeting, probably also in the month of November. We are scheduling for and anticipating up to 9 full day roundtable workshop meetings that would have facilitation. Right now, we're assuming that at least 6 of these would be in person up and down the coast with hybrid options available for people who can't make it in person. And we would be recording those meetings. They would be available for, as I'm understanding it now, available for the public to participate and follow along and view those, and then include opportunities for public comment during those meetings. And as I mentioned, hybrid options available. The working groups that I mentioned, uh, our assumption at this point is that those would be able to be managed virtually, and we're we're open to what the roundtable group, you know, thinks is needed in terms of what those working groups are going to be focused on. And then, as I mentioned, we're also planning to have individual meetings and focus groups outside of the roundtable process to be bringing in as many perspectives as possible as we're going through this engagement piece. And now, with that, um, we have quite a bit of time. Um, and as I mentioned, this is not webinar format. This is a standard Zoom meeting. What I'd like to ask is if any of you here in the meeting have questions, please raise your hand. And Andy Lanier, our Marine Affairs Coordinator, is going to help me to build a queue. And then we'll just let you come on mic, come on camera if you like, and ask us questions. And we are going to do our best. So with that, I see Charlie is first. Charlie, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your presentation and DLCD's thoughtfulness in this very big and robust process before you. Um, just to make sure I'm kind of understanding how working groups and focus groups differ. Is it the intention of the working groups to more focus on issues and subjects, while focus groups are more targeting certain audiences for engagement? Is that the
Yeah,
vision?
that's a good way to put it. Yeah, thank you. I think when I think of the working groups, I look at the example of the state of New York, which set up technical working groups or TWIGs, and they were focused on environment, supply chain, equitable communities, fisheries. And I could see us maybe having kind of a similar structure to those topic areas where, yeah, as you said, I think focus groups would be more about reaching certain audiences.
Great. That's my only question. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Ashley?
Hi, my question is around sort of, well, appreciate Charlie's question there, and just to kind of build upon that is there like an ideal target of outside of these kind of like interest groups, but amount of people to be involved with the roadmap, and also thinking about like more general South Coast or coastal communities at large, if there's kind of like a target for reaching broader community interests too.
Thank you. I the honest answer is I'm waiting to see what comes from our open recruitment. And we may be victims of our own success. If there are many, many, many people who want to be sitting at the round table, we're going to have to figure out how to structure that in a way that we can, have a productive conversation. But at the same time, I think that's going to be valuable input to us on who we need to make sure that we're reaching out to and including through these various mechanisms that are all going to be feeding into the roadmap. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess just like kind of like a follow-up, it seems like if there's, let's say, um uh out of the groups that you were thinking about earlier, if there's a lack of a certain entity, would a possible step being like doing like more direct outreach to see if any folks from that interest or sector to be more engaged in that?
That's what we're envisioning now, and that's where the flexibility of having multiple ways to engage in this process we're hoping can allow that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Philip, I see your hand.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to confirm one thing I think I heard. Did you say that there would be a hybrid option for all these in-person meetings?
Yes.
Okay. And second question is, are the meetings going to be structured around particular topics so that, for instance, someone such as myself who was particularly interested in the seabed management within the territorial sea and development in estuaries, and not so much involved with offshore matters, that I could be selective as to which meetings to attend?
Well, that's there are so many topics to talk about, and we've only got, 8 or 9 really good conversations. I think that every meeting is probably going to have a mix of topics. Uh, the advice of our facilitation is to try not to cover more than 3 main topic areas per meeting. And we are right now working to build out agendas based on the topic areas and trying to shape out the whole thing so we can make sure we have room for it all. I'm hopeful that at the first meeting we can talk through that, and then you can kind of be planning for yourself how best to engage in the conversations in the order that they're happening. So
Okay, thanks.
we're going to do our best to let you know what we're talking about before we get there.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So Athena and then Jess.
Got a question for you. I know it's been put on hold. I don't know if you can hear me. It's been put on hold. So you guys are continuing though, although this has been put on hold. So my question is your anticipation that the hold will go away? And then, so that's my first question. My second question would be, you mentioned like a process. So when all of this gets through, the state still has a say in this or not? I'm not sure if I heard that correctly or not.
Okay, I'll do my best to answer those, and if I don't get it what you're asking, I'll invite you to clarify. So, what do we know about whether the leasing process comes back at some point? I guess that's beyond the scope of what we're doing here. I think that whatever happens with leasing, we are directed by the legislature to develop a state offshore wind roadmap, and we are doing that. And whenever it occurs, it's going to create a better position for the state if and when leasing and projects come back into the fold. I guess I would direct you towards, if you've seen in the news, there was a letter from Governor Kotek to, I believe it was Director Klein at BOEM, that did specify that it's important for the state to complete our offshore wind roadmap process and associated updates that might happen to our policies before leasing activities proceed. So there has been a public setting of an expectation, I suppose. But what happens is really not within the scope of this roadmap conversation, other than we just want to be as ready as we can. And then your second question, I think I understood it to mean, at the end of our roadmap process, does the state still have a part to play in offshore wind? And I would say yes, in multiple ways. On a very direct and basic level, as I said, we have laws and policies in the state that any offshore wind project would need to be consistent with. And what the roadmap process does is give us a chance to examine those policies through the lens of offshore wind and the effects that are of concern to people, and to see if the policies are responsive to those effects and concerns. And so really the way I think of this is it allows us to sharpen our tools and to be thinking ahead. And it also allows us to identify what strategic steps or sequence of events, things like our research agenda. What are the things that we need to know that we don't yet know? And when do we need to know them? That by going through this roadmap process, we can identify waypoints between where we are today and potential future outcomes years from now. And there are multiple ways the future could go. And I think that this conversation gives us an opportunity to talk about those and think about what they might look like. Was that helpful?
A bit, yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Jess?
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation and this really, really thoughtful process. Building off of Ashley's question, I'm curious about what the process for accepting applicants for the roundtable will look like. Are there any particular qualities or characteristics of the group as a whole or of individuals that you're looking for? And then second to that, are you also expecting a commitment from applicants or members of that roundtable to participate in the full process? What are kind of the agreements of being a part of that team?
Thank you. I want to answer your second question first. I think that there would be an expectation that if an individual or a group joins the roundtable, that they would prioritize that as something to stay involved in throughout, recognizing that it's voluntary. And so there, people can make their own choices. To your question about whether there are particular qualities that we are seeking that would lead to the decisions of how big the table is, I think that we're going to have conversations within our agency with our facilitation team to figure out what is the largest size we can accommodate for a meaningful conversation as a starting point related to what we've received in terms of interest and applications. I think that, the starting point is that there be a genuine interest in the future of offshore wind in Oregon. I think that one thing that we have been discussing recently is that anyone is welcome to apply to the roundtable, but we are going to prioritize participation from Oregon residents and the federally recognized tribes of Oregon. But we're thinking more about these working groups. It's an open question, I think, about whether the working groups are a subset of the roundtable or whether it's an opportunity to expand and to bring in more voices in some subject-specific conversations. I think that's something we're still talking about. Again, I'm a month in, and we're already, we're hitting the ground running because we know we have limited time, and we're open to how this develops.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate that.
If I can add something, I think it's important from our agency's perspective to have a good representation of the interests and the stakeholders who have vested interest in not only impacts offshore, but impacts onshore. And we are, as an agency, very focused on a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens as we seek members on the roundtable. So diversity of cultures, of age, of gender, that is very important as we are putting this group together.
Are there any other questions about the process, what this roadmap is, can be? Philip.
Yeah, just a follow-up question, because you mentioned groups a while back. Is it possible for a group to be represented with more than one person participating at different times?
So having a seat that has different individuals in it.
Right.
We'll take that back and think about it. Yeah, it's worth considering.
Okay, well, you're sort of crossing.
I'll go with it. It makes a certain sense
between
to me, but I just
two
want
of
to make
our
sure.
Yeah, so two of our staff positions, we have someone who focuses on the ocean, and I focus on land use, and so
yeah. I
we would have different things to bring to it.
That's some good feedback as we're building this.
Yeah, Rachel, followed then by Jeffrey.
Hello, thank you so much for your thoughtful presentation. My question is if you have any plans for resourcing participation in the roundtables or working group, if there's any plans for stipends or support or anything of that manner.
Thank you. That's a good question. We are planning for some availability of stipends, and there is a question within the application seeking information if there are applicants who see that as a need as part of their participation.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey.
Yep. Sorry, my camera is not working. But myself and Scott McMullen Scott represents the OFCC. We're directly affected by the Acorn submarine cable that's inside the zones that was proposed for BOEM. So I filled out my application. I just need to make sure that somebody from ACS is on the committee if possible, or Alaska Communications, sorry. So that's the big thing. Myself, Scott McMullen, I'm sure we have other people on here from ACS, but at the same time, we need to have somebody that's on that committee because it is directly near our cable if this moves forward. So I just need to make sure that we have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Ryan?
Hi, is there a current high-level list of the different kinds of working groups, or is that going to be determined by the roundtable?
I have a starter idea, and it's, the ones that I listed off earlier that we may have, a fisheries focus, an environment and like uncertainty management focus, kind of the large wrapper that could be the path to development. You're talking about ports and supply chain and the industry itself, and oh gosh, there was a fourth one I can't recall. Like community equity needs. We do want to talk about, I think, engagement expectations at various aspects of this whole thing that is offshore wind, and whether that's a working group conversation or addressed via the roundtable. I don't know. As you listen to that list, is there one that you particularly saw missing?
Hmm.
I guess to answer your question, working groups have not yet been designated, and I think that would be an early conversation in the roundtable.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Len Coker. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to follow on the discussion relative to Governor Kotek's letter. And in that, she specifically says that we need to keep up our work towards the roadmap. But she's also indicated that she anticipates that BOEM will halt the efforts to go forward with the leasing of offshore here in Curry County. Can you explain to me? I'm not getting the nuance relative to what has actually been achieved by the governor's letter. Does she have the capacity to halt this process? She's asked for it. Will her request be honored?
I think the question of capacity and authority is beyond my ability to say definitively. What I will say is that on the same day that Governor Kotek sent that letter, BOEM issued a public press release saying that the auction that had been planned for October 15th is postponed, and that it was indefinitely postponed, and that they would be working with the state of Oregon and others on a path forward.
So it is increasingly becoming more nuanced. It now comes down to date and timestamp of the letters. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm sorry if I'm miscommunicating it. More that BOEM independently, but also on the same day as that letter from Governor Kotek, stated that they are postponing the leasing action. And
So am I over assuming that BOEM has not responded to her request, that they halt?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if there's been a direct specific letter in return.
Okay. Well, thanks for bringing me up to date. Appreciate it.
Other questions?
Yeah, Amy, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much for the thoughtfulness with which you're going about moving this process forward and creating like different options for people to really like be engaged and like leaderfully participate in development of the roadmap. I was curious about outside of the subject specific working groups. Will there be sessions in communities and Korean coups for people to participate and also like learn and influence the roadmap without having to join the roundtable or specific working groups? Just thinking about those opportunities for folks to like engage with you all directly and maybe members of the roundtable without having to make as much of like an ongoing commitment if that's not, gonna like work for them. So
Sure.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. The public engagement opportunities piece on that, shapes and colors diagram, I guess I'll call it, is still somewhat undefined. But I think the idea there is that we would be in communities having these events, talking about what has come out of these conversations so far as an opportunity to bring in more voices. We also have this idea of focus groups, and if I were invited to come talk to people, I would see if I can do that, just as the coordinator of the group. And I guess I'll say I would be open to requests and invitations from individual groups who want to have conversations, as well as us doing directed outreach. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Jeff, I would also add that we intend to have public comment opportunities, question opportunities, so you could submit a question to us, both probably in web form as well as in the meetings themselves. So there would be opportunities to have a voice at those events and say something without actually being a member of the roundtable. So we really are trying to allow as many open paths of communication as we can as we go through this process.
Max, I see your hand.
Yeah, good afternoon. I was a little late for the call. I just heard about it recently. So I was wondering where the recording will be shared.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I am recording this meeting. And we have an offshore wind roadmap webpage currently on the DLCD website. We're also working on an update to our coastal management programs website, OregonOcean.info. And we're just about ready to hit publish on that, and we're building an offshore wind roadmap presence there as well. I think in the near term, I'm going to try to get this video up on the DLCD website, and then we're going to have ongoing this roadmap specific website where we will be putting meeting information, videos, and such.
Okay, thanks. And where on the DLCD site would this recording go?
Yes. Andy, could you help me? And yeah, if you keep an eye on the chat, Andy's going to post a link in the chat. And Andy
Yeah,
also posted that we have a YouTube channel, so we'll put that there as well.
this video would appear on the DLCD YouTube channel. We may create a playlist specifically for offshore wind. I think we have not maybe done that yet, but we will. But this would certainly appear on that stream.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Hi, great to hear this overview. I was wondering if there are efforts to coordinate this roadmap process while keeping an eye on what is going on in Washington and California, because what goes on in those states will likely have an impact on offshore wind development. So are there West Coast wide regional coordination efforts going on and ways that these groups might want to tap into that West Coast wide activity?
That's a good question and a great point. There are interconnections between the states in various ways in which we coordinate with one another. In my role as the federal consistency person, I've been speaking with people in Washington and California. The West Coast Ocean Alliance is a group that meets with the 3 states together. As I mentioned before, the roundtable, our priority is to have Oregon voices at that table. However, we recognize that, as you said, it's connected. There are interrelationships here that we need to make sure we're considering in the process. So we want to find the best way to have those conversations and bring them into the roadmap. We have about 10 minutes left in this session. And I will say my email was on that presentation. And if you Google the roadmap, you'll see my contact information there. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about this process that we're embarking on. I'm available for that. But are there more questions here today?
I'm not seeing any hands raised, Jeff.
Okay.
Oh, wait, there's one from Rick.
Hi, Rick.
Hey, how's it going? Will BOEM be afforded a seat at this table?
So we were having a conversation about the many different state and federal agencies that all are part of this conversation, and whether they are members of the roundtable, whether they participate in an advisory capacity, whether it's by invitation. I think that conversation is still being had, but on the model of the informal working group that preceded this, I think at a starting point, agencies can participate as advisors. We've not yet, we haven't spoken to BOEM yet about their participation in the roadmap. And I guess that's a decision that has not yet been made.
Yeah, I mean, as a potential participant, I would say it would be awkward to have a BOEM part of that, which obviously they are an ultimate decision maker and potential, recipient of any, actions that the state takes. So I think as a serving an advisory role would probably be more appropriate place for BOEM.
Thank you. Charlie,
Yeah,
I see you again.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, just Rick's question reminded me of the fact that the governor's office withdrew from the interagency BOEM task force. And so have you heard, or do you think there's any expectation from the governor's office about how or where, if BOEM is a participant in the roadmap, or if that might change in the future?
I don't have an answer to that. Andy, I don't know if you do.
No, all of this is so new that we have yet to had those conversations with the governor's office.
Thanks. I think it just that was the one part of that kind of really surprised me, was the removing us from that task force, and so I just didn't know whether or not this administration had a vision for how we might further engage with BOEM or not, given that. Thanks, though.
Is there anything else from anyone? All right. Well, with that, thanks for being here. Thank you for making the time to learn about what we're trying to do here. And we are trying to do it all together. Again, our application process is open until October 15th, and we would be trying to make decisions pretty soon thereafter, with the intent of having a first meeting on November 1st. So please stay tuned and stay involved. And
Jeff, you said the 15th. It's the 14th, right?
did I say the 15th? I'm sorry. It's 14th.
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Yes. This is going to be a very human process, everybody. All right.
Thanks all.
With that, happy Friday. Have a good afternoon, and take care all.
Thank you guys.